We are here for the India Taiwan Healthcare Summit being organized by Voice of Healthcare. In this summit, the topic for our discussion is going to be during the learning from COVID. How do we collaborate? How do we innovate? And how do we bring the new investment? So, in fact, sometimes I keep saying, thanks to COVID, we have really woken up. And I think the post-COVID, we must see a different healthcare system, not only in our country, but across the globe. So discussion will be around COVID. So let me say, I have got two very able colleagues today on this show, starting with Mr. Rupak Barua, who is, I will use the word stalwart in the hospital management, hospital administration, marketing, you name the area. He has seen the healthcare from in and out for last so many years. Dr. Rupali Basu, again, is a stalwart director in the past from the Apollo, the famous hospital in Calcutta. Later on, of course, she went out of it and now she's with the Woodward. But overall, I have seen her. She's a very versatile personality, in-depth knowledge, involvement, commitment to the healthcare industry. So she will be the second panelist with us. Then we have got Upasana Arora. You must have seen her on cover photo of recent Forbes magazine, the leading entrepreneur woman of the country. And besides that, I always recognize her as the first fellow of the ISQA. I think that was a great credit, which she brought to the country, that she became the first from India to become the fellow of the ISQA. And then my old friend Neeraj Lal, again, he has proven himself to be the administrator of excellence, par excellence, I will say. Again, very soft-spoken, very diligent personality. That's why various management always love to take him on their side. So today we will be having. So these are the four persons today we are going to have. So I'll start straight away. Each one of my requests will be that I'll be asking you two questions, and each question you can answer roughly in 5-6 minutes. So that, we are able to finish the total recording in about 1 hour time. So my first question will be to Mr. Rupak Barua. My first question is that we have seen COVID. We call it COVID wave 1, then came COVID wave 2. Wave 1 was sudden. We have no idea about it. We are not hardly prepared. Somehow with the lockdown and other non-clinical intervention, somehow we managed the COVID wave 1. And then we got the wave 2. Wave 2, we should have been prepared, and I suppose we were a bit of prepared, though there was a complacency after wave 1. But we saw larger loss of lives in wave 2. The managing the hospital in wave 1 was very difficult. Wave 2 became difficult on other account because the fatality went up. Number of beds fell short. Oxygen was short. So I think these were the two different scenarios, although same COVID, but two different scenarios. I think Rupak will be able to tell us how did he manage across in his hospitals, which he is managing as a CEO. Mr. Rupak Barua.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reddy. I'd like to talk about this the COVID situation, how we could manage. You see, COVID, when I'm talking about the last year, when this COVID situation started, around mid-March. See, that time we are not having much of the COVID. How will be the behavior is a very unknown kind of a devil. Now, what happened actually for MRI, I mean, if we are talking about our hospital, the first we got the request from the government that one of our hospitals should be made this convert to this your COVID hospital. That was the first. When no one we are having any idea about the COVID. Government is saying you have so many three hospitals in one place, so you give one hospital to make it COVID one from the private sector. That's the first invitation from the government. Immediately, within 1 minute time, I took the decision to convert it to a COVID hospital without knowing much about the COVID, without knowing much about how to manage management, operation, nothing. We were not having any idea, but we got very good support from the doctor and the consultants. They were all very highly energetic. They're saying, okay, we'll just take it forward. So we started with 55-bed COVID hospital because we have 7 towers across our 3 units. So we converted one of the towers actually for the COVID. So started with 55 beds. Now, in a short span of time, in 3 months' time, we could convert it to 400 beds. We convert from 55 to 400 beds because we started, we got the knowledge, we could understand, doctors could started maintaining the hospital. But the challenge was many actually. Challenge was major one plus challenge was the infrastructural challenge because we are not having idea about how to convert this. I'm talking about the initial phase, as you were mentioning about the phase 1. So that was the infrastructural challenge that we could mitigate. There's a major challenge was also is the human resource challenge because convincing the the doctors, yes, some of the doctors, like particularly the RMOs and all, then you are talking about the nursing, then you're talking about the paramedics, and you have the housekeeping. And they are actually not very willing to take the patients of the COVID because of the so many negative media coverage was going on at that time. So somehow we could manage, we started the journey. But one of the major challenges also actually we could face, there is a financial challenge. You know that there is a non-COVID patients absolutely dried out, and only we were thriving on the COVID patients and on so much of expenses in terms of your personal protection gears and all. It's a real kind of a challenging scenario. Then gradually we could increase the number of beds. Then we started this virtual home care for the COVID patient. Then we started satellite center. Gradually, we could manage number of patients. That's a very good support we could make it. There is a lot of media coverage. We could save a lot of human resources. Populations. But the problem actually is not the issue. Issue is when we started this way, the healthcare workers actually started getting infected. That's the major challenges that we have faced. Then managing those human resources, because as of now, this is a human resource, that's in healthcare, that's the crisis. And the shortage of manpower, again, that actually had made us real in the trouble space. Then gradually we made it, and somehow the phase 1 we could manage. Now talking about the phase 2, already we started. We could know the behavior of the this virus. We had made it, and the phase 2. Now the phase 2, the problem is the surge. Second surge is the problem is that first surge it took 3 to 4 months time actually to increase the number of patients. From the 55 to 400 patients, we could manage in 3 to 4 months time. But suddenly it happened in this phase 2. There is in 15 days to 20 days time, it suddenly spiked the number and reached out to is a peak level. Now, the major part we could see in the second phase, that though we know the managing of the virus, but the major problem we face in this second surge is this managing the critical care, because many of the patients is in very critical situations and they were looking for more of the critical care beds. That was a major challenge because we are not well equipped to handle those many number of critical patients. Though we had converted around maybe 150 critical care beds, but there was so much of demand for the critical care beds, then it was a challenge because to convert to critical care beds from the general beds or from the HTU, it needs a lot of medical equipment which was not available in the market as well. So that was a major challenge. Then we started taking these patients in the ECMO. ECMO was also, we started with 1 ECMO, then we increased it to the 7 ECMOs over the time. And that was also a journey actually. So the phase 1 challenge, that is how to handle the patients and all. Then we learned a lot, the behavior of the patients and all those things. Second surge, sudden increase, we were not that prepared for the critical care, that many number of critical care beds. So, and there is a shortage of the medicine as well. That's all we know. It has happened pan-India basis. That's one big issue. So, but the learning is out of that is a lot of learning station we had as well. One part that we could see, there's a human resources. We could ramp up the human resources within a short time. We could start. That is the talking about the COVID from 55 to 400. It took a lot of manpower, skill development. There's a lot of training. All those things we could make it. The second part also we could learn actually there is a technology within a short time. The digital part actually, whatever we had learned out of this, the major advantage that we had, that we converted our hospitals to some extent is 60 to 70% as a digital-based hospital and technology-based hospital. That actually really had helped us in particularly in terms of your telemedicine, in terms of your virtual healthcare, in terms of your contact-based your treatment procedure. We could manage. We had initiated robot in this so that the doctors and the nurses many times they interact with the patients directly. So all those things started. We had developed ourselves within the short span of time. First phase, we learned something. Second phase, we have also developed ourselves in many ways in terms of human resources, in terms of technology, in terms of ramp up of the equipments. All those things happened. So this was the real, it's a very journey, Joe. It's a very challenging journey, but we could navigate it very efficiently, effectively. All our manpower, the doctors, the nurses, really they had done a great job. And we could still we are managing though that COVID is not end, but the same situation is going on in our place. That was all my learning.
Sir, you are muted.
So thank you, Rupert. I'll come back to you for one or two more questions later on. Now let me turn to Dr. Rupali. Although she is known as an administrator, and now she is of course heading the boutique hospital. I used to call Calcutta Hospital boutique hospital in Woodland. But I'm sure she has not lost touch with the clinical part of medicine. My question to you is, I saw during wave 2, the major problem was that the treatment protocols kept on changing. Sometimes ICMR brings out, sometimes Director General Health brings out, sometimes AIMS bring out. And then our clinicians also were at loss. They kept on prescribing any number of tests, diagnostic tests, if you see, I don't want to name them. Being a viral infection, but antibiotics were giving left, right, and center. Steroids also came into picture. So I think somehow we lost really, how do we come out with a new protocol? Because once, let me agree here, being the unknown virus, behavior was not known. So even for ICMR, it was difficult to, fix the protocols. But in spite of that, my major worry is that we were not able to transmit this message across to the country. Forget about metro towns, anywhere it could not reach. So I want to ask you, your experience, how it went, and if it went wrong, how will you suggest to the government, to ICMR, to medical fraternity, that how do we come out and bring out the uniform protocol, develop some, war room, something like that, which can take care of medical or treatment protocols? Please throw light on that.
So thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful question. And of course, thank you, Voice of Healthcare, for having us. I think if you remember, Dr. Gyani, since 2002, when I personally went with a group of people to Harvard and learned quality systems, it was not even understood what is JCIA, what is accreditation in our country. We brought those languages, brought those knowledge to our country, and then from then, I think we are talking about this protocolized treatment regime, standard treatment guidelines, and clinical pathways since then. But over a period of time, this almost 2 decades went away, and nobody really, gave much heed to the standard treatment guidelines, because we are, whatever the 12 lakhs doctors that the country has produced so far who are practicing, are all from different institutes, different training backgrounds, different regions. We have so much of diversity. We never took that challenge of, yes, working together in the same way, in the same standardized manner. We need to look after patients. But we actually, as a country, I think till today have not understood the value of protocolized treatment regime, which I personally propose and always tell and support. But we saw quite a few of that in 2021. So with the background of that, nobody is interested in protocolized regime. The regime came in, and who would give the protocolized treatment? It's ICMR, which was always thought through. Dr. Bhargava came into the limelight. We didn't even hear him talk so much, in the past. And suddenly, in a pandemic scenario, ICMR took that, Indian Council of Medical Research is such an important institute, came up to that role and started giving the protocolized regimes to all the states. So Government of India started giving the standardized protocols. It went to all the states of the country, and every state, because health is a state subject, so every state actually adopted those protocols, and then send it to all the hospitals and healthcare providers in the state. So for us in the West Bengal, state of West Bengal, our director health service and director medical education started giving those protocols in a very, very standardized manner. So the moment there was a Government of India protocol coming in, we were ready to. There was one more. We not only listened to that, but there was a protocol on the basis of what it should be in the state of West Bengal, and then it was given to all the private and government health facilities. So I would say the protocolized regime, which I support, and I think it is important to have standardized care for all, is saw the light of the day. So I was very happy to see that, yes, protocols are coming in. The upside was that, but the downside was there, because who is making the protocols? How quickly we are coming up with the new knowledge? How importantly, what way the message is, what is the content of the message, how we are writing those protocols, how fast it is coming to everyone, is every state listening to it at the same time? Because the content is important, and the time of delivery is important. Even in a country, as we all have seen, the north was doing some different problem, south was having different time problem, western world was different, and we were different. So there were even diversity inside the country. So there were so many specific protocol was required for that particular state, which is, I think, was for a country of 1.3 billion, when we actually had a lot of challenge. And I think we failed at those areas, where if you don't write the content in the right manner, if we don't start giving it to the requirement of that particular state, then we have made a lot of confusion, we have made delays. And I think we have also had people like non-medical people like IS officer giving protocols to us. This is a scientific problem of a scientific medical nature. So that there has to be the scientific brain to put the content in right perspective. So those are the things, I think, were the downsides. But I would, at the end of the day, I would still propose a protocolized regime, because that allows a diverse country and large country like us to give the right kind of standardized care for all. So we did had issues in antibiotic policy, infrastructure issues. We had, as you mentioned, there were many issues, but we all tried to sort them out. Say, for example, in my hospital, I'll just give you a few more lines and then I close. Is that what we did was we created a command nucleus. We had a task force. So as an organization, we created the task force. And I was very much there in every decision making, because the command nucleus was supposed to be there. The knowledge which I have for last 3 decades is something which I think was necessary to put in at that time of pandemic. Then we created identified activity champions. So we had that these are the activities need to be done, because there were changes everywhere, Dr. Gani. We had changes in the infrastructure, changes in every protocol, changes in every doctor, connect to the doctors and make them understand that this is what is the new protocol. So there was a lot of activity, and all those activity we had champions. And fortunately, because of the current digitized age, we had WhatsApp groups, we had email groups, and we created a lot of content in both EDM format, in text format, as well as video format. So kept on informing information to the right kind of people, and tried to keep the organization tight and very up to date, and with the scientific knowledge which was coming up. WHO also did a good job, because they were
Yeah.
also passing on the information very regularly. So we kept in touch with the international, what is happening, the other countries, what is happening, other states, what is happening, and then kept on working. I think that's kept us afloat.
Right.
And the standardized planned way, if we keep doing, then I think we will in the future we'll also do good. Thank you so
Now,
much, sir.
you have summed up very well. Only one point of concern which came to us from time to time, that role of NCDC was missing. We didn't find the the Disease Control Center coming prominently during such time. And
They
second
should
issue
be
was
fully
that how do
involved, sir.
we,
They should have been fully involved. Actually, I think that we did miss up on, or I think we didn't work finally on the command nucleus at the government of India level. We needed to
yeah,
have many more important people coming in and creating, rather than the IS officers giving and talking about protocols. It should have been more and more scientific brains should have been coming, Dr. Gyani. You should have
yeah,
been there. There should have been MCDC. There should have been more, heads should have been there at the GOI level, because that's the command nucleus for the country. Like I was the
yeah.
command nucleus for my hospital in Woodlands. There should have been a command nucleus for the country. I think we could have, in the futuristic, God forbid, we shouldn't have any more pandemic like this, or crisis situation like this. But we should think about, for any disease or any health situation, we must have a command nucleus for GOI. So that I think, and also for the states. So that's very important, sir. Thank you again for
Thank
reminding.
you. Now I bring the very key question. In wave one, everyone was in panic. In fact, when lockdown was announced, patients were not coming to hospitals. The staff from most of the hospital took leave, went home. From north, people went to Kerala, ward boy, nurses. Virtually, one third of the human resource was out of the hospital. Luckily, in wave two, all people were there, manpower were there. But in my opinion, managing and motivating the manpower was the key in wave one. I found the hospital management which were able to develop the teamwork, communicate from the HOD to the downward boy. When we were able to develop that team, that hospital succeeded. Wave two, of course, had little different problem, because we had PPE by the time we had the protocol. But still, I think the motivating the manpower was the key, because patients were not allowed to, the relations were not allowed to come inside the hospital. How do we communicate from ICU ward to the patient relation overall? And senior doctors were busy in consulting, while junior doctors were only required to be in the shop floor. Overall, if you see, in my opinion, managing manpower was most difficult. And I understand, I think Upasana is known to have led the team. That actually, as I know in the circles of Delhi, they were quoting me that, okay, Yashoda managed and Upasana was the helm of the affair. So let us listen from her, how she succeeded in motivating the manpower in this difficult situation.
Thank you, Dr. Gyani. Thank you, every Voice of Healthcare, for giving me this opportunity. Actually, whenever your staff is, feeling little bit confused and they are feeling scared. So, as Dr. Gyani, you rightly said that in first wave there was lots of confusion because we were not prepared, but in second wave we were quite prepared, and staff was also very much aware about all the protocols, and everything was there. But there should be something extra which can motivate them, and that was the leaders. Then role came of a leader, that our senior most doctor has to be there with them, or we were always there with them. They should not feel like if something goes wrong with us, then who will help us? And if they are not here, if they are not working, so why we? So just to yeah, so it was biggest question in everybody's mind. So what we did, that we have created a core team. So all my heads of all the departments, even for patient care, senior person, and my MS, my clinical director, everybody was taking lead, and they were visiting patients. All my senior most doctors were visiting patients, and all these people who are not supposed to visit in normal days, who are they are not going each and every day to patients room, but especially in corona time, these people were visiting patients, and they were creating an example to everyone. So even nurses and ward boys, they were feeling ki if doctor, senior most doctor can go, or agar a medical director can go and visit patient, so why not we? Same time, we were providing them some fun time also, so they should not all the time stress, because COVID time itself was giving stress to everyone. They were COVID patient or not COVID patient, everybody was all the time scared that I can get infection. So we were providing some fun time for them, and providing them with a little bit something to eat, something to sing. So we were creating an atmosphere in my hospital. So it is not very stressed atmosphere. People are happy. They were enjoying life. It should not be like this. But I am really sorry to say that we lost really so many lives. So sometimes it is difficult to, manage human emotions. When a young girl died in my hospital, she was supposed to marry next day. And that day was very emotional day for everyone. No one was even ready to have their lunches. They said ki madam, we are feeling very disheartened that we could not save her. So such kind of incidences, when coming to into my knowledge, I was just giving them assurance that don't worry, there is something which is beyond our control. So but you have to give your best to the patients, because they are here just because we are the one who are going to meet them, who are going to help them, and their attendants are also relying on us. They cannot do anything. So what we were doing, we were just providing them some video call to relatives. And what was happening, when my staff was giving call to patients attendant, they become very good family friends also, because every day they were calling to their some relative. So after this corona was over, people are still coming to hospital and meeting those staff. So there should be some human touch. It should not be only robotic thing ki everything is just going with a all the protocols has been followed and everything has done. But what I did, what was the USP of Yashoda, that we were very close with our staff as well as our patients, because whatever I was giving to them, they were giving to patients. So this was the mool mantra, that we need to give some extra personal care, some love, affection, and some personal touch, so people should feel happy. Yeah.
I think that is a wonderful way of putting it, that once the leader is in the front, I think it automatically becomes motivation. So I think this is very rightly put by Upasana. Now let me come. I think there is some noise. Some echo is coming. No, okay. Now it is okay. Now let me come to Neeraj. Neeraj has served most of the time in Gujarat. And Gujaratis are known to be good in finance, maintaining bottom line. My question to you is, in COVID-1, I think hospital industry suffered hell of a lot. I think our bed occupancy was less than 30%. And in wave 2, reverse happened. Our bed occupancy was 120%. Overall, how do you see that? What was the impact on sustainability of the hospital if I put together wave 1 and wave 2? And my supplementary question to you is that in wave 2, we got a lot of complaints that there was overcharging. Already we have negative perception among the society that further widened. So can you put up your point of view? how the financial sustainability has hit the industry, and how do we improve the image of the industry that we are not commercial, we are still charging the rates what are right for us.
Right.
Neeraj.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for this question. I've worked majority of my time period in western part of India and south. So I'll compare both these parts in the term of healthcare management of COVID 1 and 2 and the revenue impact. I think COVID wave 1, everybody, not only India, entire world, it was new thing. So every hospital, maybe small, right, suffered a huge financial loss. The OPD, patient footfall, health checkup, vaccination, surgeries, and so on. So it has been estimated by a study around 40 to 50% cut in their revenue. Most of the small hospital actually closed down because I was meeting people. They say they have closed down and they were up for sales. And since the treatment was not known, so most of the big time hospital were also saying no to the patient. At that time, I was in Bangalore during COVID 1. I am seeing all the deliveries from small town places, tier 2, tier 3, they're coming to Bangalore, and most of the hospital are not taking those deliveries. There was a crisis of ventilators, oxygen, and so on. So at that time, everything was new, but vis-a-vis COVID wave 2, I think COVID wave 1 was managed by government of India, like lockdown start, lockdown close. But I think once we graduated from wave 1 to wave 2, it was a state responsibility. And depending upon the condition, depending upon the advice from experts, they are putting up on and off this, lockdown start and lockdown. Therefore, one of the reason what I personally believe, since it was not governed from a central way or a core committee, therefore there was an issue. However, in the second wave, the treatment have come. Some of the medication prescribed by the various government authorities were there. There were oxygen plants. The country has now 18 lakhs isolation beds and so on and so on. But I always feel you're talking about press, media, projection and all. If anyone asks anybody what our ideal company should look like, so answer will come: making profit, good margin and EBITDA. I think majority of the overcharging complaints are coming from small time hospitals who don't have a legal certificates, they don't have a doctors on board, they don't have a good staff on board. So probably to recover from the loss, because first wave, I think most of the small time hospital get closed down, and in order to recover the losses, I think overcharging was happening. However, in the corporate hospital, because we got a good team here in Hyderabad and Bangalore, we were talking, they were restricting to the charges. But I think state government plays important role. Say, for example, Government of Gujarat have taken 3 hospital in the city of Ahmedabad, 400 bedded hospital in one of the hospital and 200 bedded. And believe, there were the government circular from Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, they will pay us for free beds. See, they're talking to the private hospital. So say, for example, a circular says 650 rupees for a general ward per day, whether the bed is occupied or not. Vis-a-vis, if it is occupied, to 4,000 per day. Ventilator beds, 1,800 versus 10,000. So these are the rates which Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation has released. So private healthcare was not suffered in the term of patient. So when you book the beds, when the government is booking or blocking the beds, they are paying for the empty bed as well. Unlike it, say for example, in Andhra and Telangana, people are spying on the hospital. They are putting up CCTV in the hospital. Doctors are not wearing masks and everything they expect from the hospital. So I think this disproportionality is there between the different states and the government which they work. But however, I have seen, thanks to this COVID, so many new technology came. I know in Bangalore, less than 5% people in my hospital was doing a video consultation, and some star doctors were not coming to video consultation for a variety of reasons. But because of COVID, now we are doing over 38% through a video consultation. The ERP solution, the e-protocols, everybody is followed. Now so many startup has come, which is doing. So I think reason for high cost in private healthcare is, I think, cost of the material as well as the equipment. Most of the equipment what we purchase and all, it is coming from outside. Thanks to Government of India and machinery, now we are making so many things in our country. I think cost will go down. Secondly, the penetration. I understand now the premium for the insurance companies has gone up because of the COVID. So I think affordability can be increased by major penetration of the insurance and reducing taxes for the hospital. And since this Modi Care has come, so now any which ways, all these schemes, sir, which you always advocate through HPI banner, the CGHS, EHS, or any which ways they are low. The rate has not been updated since so many years. And Modi Care did the same thing. They have taken the base of those rates and they had made this insurance policy. I was fearing a time will come when every insurance company, both private and GIPSA, will say 10% more than Modi Care, 15% more than Medicare. Any which ways, hospitals are in loss and you are impeding. Now in cities like Delhi and Bangalore and Hyderabad, I think more than 60% business come from the credit companies. And if these kind of rates goes as below like CGHS or a Modi Care scheme, I think it will suffer the hospital. I understand government has given around 50,000 ventilator to the various machineries. And now to make use this ventilator, we have purchased lakhs of spares, consumables and all. So I think there was no coordination between the state machinery as well as a private hospital lobbying. And thirdly, which is the most important thing, I think government failed down. They were asking us how many ICU beds you have, how many ventilators you have. I think these things they have to do while they empanel the hospital. Every year, every alternate year, they give a registration certificate to us. And at that time, they don't know. So I think this is a good mix of both things. Everybody has to settle, but thankfully health is becoming a very big subject now. Now everybody, including Government of India, is talking about health in a big way. Whatever you do good thing in the hospital, it is not coming on the front page. It is going to, third, fourth, fifth pages. But now since government is talking about health, and I think budget allocations are there, in COVID wave 1, we are not producing PPE. Now we are the largest producer of PPE in the world. Ventilator, everybody is making now. And I think the startup, and I've seen the technology, doctors are making aggressive use of the technology. Pre-COVID, only 2 doctors in my entire group were making use of 100% use of EMR. And now around 45 doctors are making use of EMR. As a result, business also goes up, sir. So when a prescription is generated, so it goes to pharmacy, it goes to lab, and it goes to so on. So now you can track the prescription and see where it is happening. So I feel the things are good. Now we can see the beds. Now in our hospital, we can see which bed is full, which patient are on ventilator, through all those things. So I think a perception is there, but I think private hospital has to come on the same page to talk in a unison. But I am sure I've seen no private hospital have charged more. See the government have put out the rates. The government is doing penalty in cities like Vizag and Nellore, Apollo, KIMS and all. They have paid so much of penalty. Though we have treated maximum number of patients in this COVID wave, more than 10,000 patients were seen by the hospital. So when these things come up, I think the enthusiasm, the motivation of the doctors and the hospital go for a toss for a big time. Sir, you are on a mute mode.
Some economics, you have summed up very well. And this is the scenario we are going to have in time to come. Now, let me go back to my second round. And second round is very important from my perspective. Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi had announced in 2018 that he will like to see 3,000 new hospitals with 100 beds in tier 3 towns. To best of my knowledge, till today, no new hospital has come up in these tier 3 towns. While we have huge shortage of tertiary care, particularly in tier 2, and forget about tier 3, we don't have. In spite of such huge shortage, what is preventing industry to come up and invest in tier 3 town? What will you suggest the measures by which we can incentivize the industry to open up the hospital tier 3 town? And tell me which are these stumbling blocks. Rupak Barua.
Yes, Dr. Gyani, this is a very important part of this healthcare system delivery models, actually, tier 2 and tier 3 places. More, whatever the healthcare systems we talk about, mostly we talk about considering the metro cities, the large hospital, large group, those who are there in the system, they are mostly from the metro city. Hardly you will find it is in the tier 2, tier 3 places. Now, if we are talking about the opportunities and challenges in terms of your tier 2 and tier 3 places, first, if we can go back a little bit, that India was one of the pioneers in health service planning with a focus on primary healthcare. It is started, I think, in the 1946, a health and development committee headed by Sir Joseph Bode, actually. That person actually headed the committee. I'm talking about way back 1946, and they were talked about that a well-structured, well-planned healthcare system has to be there in India, and the major focus should be primary healthcare sector. So that was the major part where we have failed right now. If we see the structure of these tier 2, tier 3 places, and why the the metro cities, the large hospitals are occupied by these patients from these tier 2, tier 3 places, because there is not much of healthcare facilities, support services is not available in those tier 2, tier 3 places. Now, if we see the primary healthcare center is the major part where we are lacking absolutely, and it was there before pre-pandemic and post-pandemic also. That gap actually is very open now. It has been observed particularly. This primary healthcare center actually, if you see, that provides the first level of contact between the population and healthcare providers. Out of that, they will be defined, they will treat, and gradually the patient will be shifted for the secondary or the tertiary care to this other large hospital. That was where is it failed. Particularly in this COVID time, you will find that there is a because of this, your primary health care was suboptimally utilized. Not much of the major treatment could happen, and more of the patients actually looking into this your secondary or the tertiary care. Now, why is the wrong actually in the primary health care center? Though in this budget, we could see that there is a lot of the 2.5% which we are talking about, the budget allocation that has happened in this financial year. And let's see, maybe there is a lot of focus also. Out of the Ayushman Bharat, you were saying, Dr. Gyani, that is also part is that they will promote this primary health care, because that's the backbone of any healthcare system. If you go see this NHS, you will find they are actually thriving on this the primary healthcare center. There is a very structured kind of a primary healthcare center run by a GP, and there is a 2,500 populations actually being managed by one primary health center with one GP, and there are a couple of trained nurses and the paramedic staff. If we talk about the Indian perspective, if you see, there is one primary health center being covered by 30,000 population. And one GP or one doctor is a half-hearted, and in some time there is no doctor. This being managed by your paramedic staff, some of the technicians and all, some of the nurses. So there is a huge crisis of the manpower. That is the first part we were talking about. Now, we are saying that there are 3,100 hospitals will come up. That was a declaration by the Honorable Prime Minister. But in reality, if we could see, is not things happening. The one major part, until and unless we are holding this bull by horn, actually it is not going to happen. See, the problem you will have to find out, you will have to look for solution, then you come up with the infrastructure. Building hospitals with that is a building structure is very easy. You can get some fund from where is some your World Bank fund, you can get it, some of the trust board can give the fund, and you can make the hospital. Who will run the hospital? Where the doctors? Where the other paramedic staff? See, in Bengal, if you see, our state government also tried a lot. And initially, during this one, they have created actually 42 super specialty hospitals in tier 2, tier 3 places. There is a very good intention, positive intention, because there is a shortage of beds, and particularly in the secondary segment, secondary space. So they could see there is at least super specialty hospital, which they could convert the district hospital, they converted into a large super specialty care hospital. 42 super specialty care hospital they had created over the time in last 5 years, 7 years time. But ultimately, the reality is that half of the hospitals are actually vacant. No one is there, and there are the crores of equipments are placed there. No, because people doesn't know actually how to operate those equipments. See, that is the skilled manpower which we are talking about, trained manpower we are talking about. Now, this 16th of July, this your Prime Minister has inaugurated some of the 6 courses post-COVID. Actually, the 6 courses has come up. The skill development under the National Skill Development and Healthcare Development. The 6 courses has come up. All those medical equipment courses, your home care, and all those things. The 6 courses has come up. So this is the first is the needed actually the skill development. Though there are plenty of skill development courses happening right now, I am also chairman of the Eastern Region Healthcare Council, and we are also working for this. We are also starting a lot of courses actually, the short-term 3-4 months courses, certificate courses also we are starting, which is very extremely important. Now, we all know, I think we should not discuss here much about the shortage of the doctors and shortage of the nurses. That is because we do not have the plenty number of doctors and the nurses. There is a million, lakhs of doctors and nurses is a shortfall compared to the beds availability. Now, as of now, we are below 1 bed per 1,000 population, but as per the WHO, it should be 3 beds. But where the infrastructure? So part is the infrastructure and who will manage the hospital. So now, as Dr. Gyani, you are talking about how to develop, yes, what is the solution there? We should not talk about the problems, what's the solution. Solution is the major issue is that, yes, of course, we are talking about infrastructure. Government can give soft loan. We can come up with a lot of infrastructure, but major part that we need to do is manpower first. So there is no doctor, no transport system. There is no proper road available. There is no proper, one doctor will go from some places and will stay over there. How they will manage? There is no education system there. So these are the basic part actually. We'll have to make it. We'll have to incentivize them. We have to electricity part, the other parts, the proper drinking water has to be there. These are not available. Doctors are scared to go from the metros to cover up this your tier 2, tier 3 places. So these are the shortages part. Infrastructure is no big issue. We can create the infrastructure. Any hospital, government can infrastructure. But these are the areas, the road, transport, this electricity, and the availability of manpower is very important, and we'll have to take up in a very structured manner. We'll have to take up for development of this tier 2, tier 3 places.
Thank you. I agree with you that manpower is the issue. Now we have little short of time, so I'll expect very pointed answer from now Dr. Rupali. You see, we have this shortage Rupak was talking about. We have shortage of the infrastructure in tier 3 towns. India is leader in the IT. World over, we are known as IT leaders. Telemedicine, teleconsultation, we have been talking for 10 years, more than 10 years. What has stopped? In the USA, if you go, all these primary centers are headed by a registered nurse. She can do ultrasound, she can do X-ray, send the picture, video consultation with the consultant. Why we have not been able to do it? Can you really tell me the practical answer by which we can all wake up and bring out the telemedicine system in our country to cover the remote locations?
Sir, I think just going ahead with what Rupak was saying, that in 2019 statistics says about 30,000 primary health center that we have, of which 83% are in rural areas. So unless we contact the the rural areas, as you were mentioning, then we will not be able to really get this entire knowledge of IT, entire telemedicine, now that it is approved by the Government of India as a standard way of telemedicine was not approved even 2 years back. So during the pandemic time, it was approved as a proper consultation by the doctors. That will not be taken up. I think 2 issues, sir. One is this technology, how you are going to reach the technology to the remotest area. That is the technology solution. That definitely we'll have to sort that out. And 2 is that how do you buy out the owning up of the doctors? These doctors who are we talk about. I know Rupak is also talked about that we are going digital. I also started most of the hospitals, we know that telemedicine is by way you have to connect to people at homes. But really speaking, sir, when I see the numbers, I see that it's very minuscule. So all doctors are not taking up. So the doctors have to be all doctors, this 12 lakh MBBS doctors that we have in the country, we have to communicate to those guys. We have to make sure that they own up and they say that yes, telemedicine is the answer. They have to, anything which, if a doctor says that yes, I am going to lead, I am taking this technology, then nothing can, they can move an earth. So I think doctors owning up is one important area which, by hook and crook, we have to communicate to them and get their owningness, sir. And the second is that this technology suites, technology connectivity, we have the answer. We just need to create those telemedicine centers like the way that we have created the fax machine centers and cafes and all that. We have to have telemed centers where people will, this should be taken as a separate service. And the whole country, we can create so many thousands and thousands of telemed centers where this primary health centers are the right place because there's a block there is a infrastructure there. So you create a telemed center, get the doctor out there, and you don't need to, when a doctor can be in remote locations. And it's so much of additional a nurse sitting there in all sub centers, which is 5,000 population, you have a nurse. So if the nurse have been qualified, made sure that you have a telemed suite or a telemed consult room, and everywhere 30,000, we have to think of that and then go into a detailed plan of creating those telemed suites and telemed consult rooms. I think it is a matter of months we will do it, sir. It's a question of thinking the right planning and just getting it executed. I don't think we just need so much of answers to it. It's
Yeah.
just a government directive, all of us coming together and getting it done. We just need 30,000 telemed centers and all our 12 lakh doctors to know. It will be within months, it will be done. One particular entrepreneur, if they can take up, or if the government of India helps somewhere, sir, I think we will look up to you, sir. You are the closest to government of India there. We are far off in the east. So if you can communicate, we can take a delegation to government of India. We can talk to them and make sure that this is the answer. It's a very simple answer, sir. So if we can do that, I'm sure we will reach out to every Indian, which is what our aim is. Thank you, sir.
I think that what Rupali says, I agree. We have so much capability within us, only thing that somewhere a little bit is coming, that has to be broken. And I think we can turn around and make the India number one country in the world for healthcare. Now, Upasana, I want to ask you a simple question. Rupak said there's a shortage of beds, infrastructure. Rupali said that we can do it through IT. I have simple suggestion. Yashoda, for example, has got 500 to 600 beds in Ghaziabad overall. I am told you can double it. From 600, you can make it 1200 by simply opening a home health vertical in Yashoda Group. And the beds in the home can become your beds. Can you do it? What is the way you can do it? Do you think it will succeed? What connectivity issues are required? What wearable sensors, teleconsultation, telemedicine? I think this model I am presenting, how can you make 1200 beds from 600?
So thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Actually, we have 700 beds, and now we are going to add 1,300 beds, but not in the form of home health, because
Okay.
I believe home health can be helpful only when patient is not very sick. But there are, lots of people have taken this facility at home. When there was a corona, lots of people could not get a bed in a hospital, so they arranged all the facility at home, and luckily lots of people got benefit also, and they become cured. But same time, I believe sometime when we talk about critical care, then this home care solution is not very feasible. So what I believe, government should give some incentive to those who are interested to open more beds, and there should be one single window for all clearance. Sometimes people are become fed up, because when you have to go for this permission to this department and this permission to this department. So if really we want to create more beds, we are supposed to create more doctors, more nurses, and more infrastructure. So for infrastructure, we need to provide all those who are ready to open more private hospitals. Same time, government should also take a lead, and they should also open more hospitals. But I strongly believe that if we talk about home care through telemedicine or through some app, that is not going to work, because sometimes patient need his doctor in front of him, and still I believe that touch of a doctor, nobody can take that place. Any technology cannot take place, because when doctor is coming and saying, no, you are recovering, you will be fine very soon, that presence of a doctor and his these small words can create a major difference in somebody's life. So I believe we should enhance more beds, and but it should be physically, and government should actually give us some incentive, not in the form of money, but in the form of easiness, some ease to do business. Thank you, sir.
So I think what I will like to say that from 700 beds, 70% of beds you can do only ICU. Make Yashoda as a ICU hospital, and the rest of them let them come for daycare and then continue as a home care. I think that maybe mixed model can work. So I think now please start the way you have created the name for yourself. Make ICU Yashoda as a ICU hospital, so that people come to you all over from UP to you for ICU care. Anyway, I am sure you will be thinking on these lines. Neeraj, my question is very simple but very difficult. Everybody from Prime Minister to Secretary and down the line to Gram Panchayat level, everybody is saying make healthcare affordable, make healthcare affordable. Is there something like magic that we can make healthcare affordable? Please answer.
Sir, we can make healthcare affordable with technology. See, what you're talking about, home healthcare and all. In this pandemic time only, we have started a home healthcare vertical, and just 3 months, they are doing a 1 crore business per month. So I think because of fear, anybody, like some of the banks have given 200 RT-PCR every day. So all those things are happening. Number one, I think if we embrace technology in a big way, like AI, machine learning and all, I think we can make home healthcare very affordable. Number two, there is no regulation of prices in the market, sir. See, cost of material and cost of equipment. So if the various IT parks, the various biomedical park which is started in some of the state, if we can give a easy access to them, I think the cost of the material equipment is a high majority. Then the cost of healthcare will go down. And most important thing, the pricing of healthcare. And I think you are the biggest advocate of pricing in healthcare. So prices in healthcare ranges from 40,000 of CABG to 8 lakhs. So these are the things which this media and everybody talk about healthcare. So if something is there which can have a uniform pricing, base level pricing, and then I think we can make healthcare affordable.
I think because we have just, I think almost, taken 60 minutes. We have still five more minutes.
Sir, just one point I just want to mention. You're talking about tier 2, tier 3 city. Sir, apart from manpower and all, one of the most important thing, private healthcare is driven by private equity market. So most of the private equity player, which I know for the past 7 years, they want to invest in the big cities only. Like private equity of us, which is from the central and southern part of Europe, they want we should invest in tier 2, tier 3 cities. If you see our group Medicover, which is a European base, we are only available in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. If you see all Andhra and Telangana, tier 2, tier 3 city. If you go to Maharashtra, tier 2, tier 3 city. So I think from the private equity side also, if they want a hospital should invest in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So it is also one of the solution which we can make the healthcare affordable in these towns also.
That's right. You're right. Actually, that is a chicken and egg story. They say that they don't want to go to tier 3 because there are no specialists available. But I think things are improving. Some model of use of technology or adapting the hospital closer 50 kilometers away from your hospital. You can do it that way. But overall, I think this discussion has been virtually, I think we have been able to discuss the challenges and also come up with a solution. I think the good part of this discussion was all four of you were talking about the solution. You were not talking about the problem. So I think this is a great learning, and I think the compilation from this session will go a long way in making the overall recommendation by the Voice of Healthcare. And I'm really grateful to all of you to come up with the answers as I'm saying, because we are good in raising problems, but you were the four of you who were only talking of the solution. So thank you very much. And hopefully this will be very useful session for the listeners. Thank you.